Hello and welcome to the Premier Football Podcast. This edition focuses on the first game week in the Fantasy Premier League season. I'm joined today by Sean Windsor. Sean, how are you getting on?
I'm good, excited. Football's almost back, although it feels like it only ended a short while ago.
No better man to be talking us through the fantasy element of this year's season. Are you excited for it?
I always love the fantasy aspect. Adds a little bit more to the Super Sundays that might feature Burnley and Crystal Palace when you're watching them.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on the show and hopefully be able to stay with us through the season, and we'll focus on your team and my own team and see how we get on. Obviously yourself not being too aligned with any Premier League club kind of gives you the neutral factor that's giving you the advantage over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, when Swansea were in it anyway, I wouldn't be picking too many players. So,
right. There are a couple of changes this season, Sean, to the pricing of some players and a couple of the elements of the fantasy. Do you want to talk us through that?
The big news would be the deadline for game weeks has changed. So instead of the hour beforehand, it's an hour and a half. If you didn't know, that would catch a few people out because sometimes it's roll over on a Saturday morning, just get it finished before 11:30. Players, the big one would be Aubamayang. He's now a midfielder, 12 million. And then Martial and Rashford have swapped forward and midfielder.
Well, look, we'll get started. Do you want to show us the first draft?
Yeah, this is my team. At the moment, there's always tinkering to be done up until the deadline. There's a couple of players here that I can guarantee will be starting game week 1. I look at Aubamayang, Salah, Alexanderarnold. I think with the Manchester clubs missing, they're going to be in a lot of teams. With McCarthy in goal, I always play a 4.5 keeper. I think he offers the best of the cheap keepers this season, especially early with Southampton's fixtures. Along the back line, I think having Sheffield United from the start, it's not as important as last year. Henderson might be a miss, but I quite like having Stevens there because he's the wing back getting forward. They don't score many goals, but the wing backs can be involved. I think covering them defensively, if they show 3/4 of the defensive resilience they showed last year, I think Sheffield United will be important to start off with. Matt Doherty's moved to Spurs. We've seen for years what he does at Tottenham. I think going into a Jose Mourinho team, having a Spurs defender, and especially with Mourinho favouring a right-sided defender, I think Doherty could produce some big figures this year. He is also in doubt for my team just because he's that extra money. If I need to find money from somewhere, he could be the one cut because traditionally I go a little bit tight at the back in regards to having just Alexander-Arnold as my big one. And the rest are going to be rotated around. You'll notice Charlie Taylor's on the bench. He comes in. Burnley again, another defensively sound team. Almost as many clean sheets as Man City, as the top teams for clean sheets last season. In the midfield, it's the first of one, maximum 2 punts for game week 1. Havertz. I think Chelsea are going to be really attacking this year. The signings they've made are really impressive. Pulisic would be my first choice, but it looks like he's injured for game week 1. Ziyech is coming in. Werner's in. I would love to have Werner. Loved watching him play football for a number of years now, but I'd like to see where he starts if they go with him as the number 9 up top from game week 1.
Sorry, Sean, how much is Werner?
Werner's 9.5, so he's a little bit expensive to maybe gamble game week 1. They do play Brighton, who I'm no fan of, and I think they're likely to leak many goals in almost any game. I think Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea going against Brighton, I fancy them all to score multiple goals, so I'm thinking Havertz. He could change if I can find a way of fitting Werner in instead, or maybe sit back a week, see what Werner does, get him in after they play Liverpool game week 2. Say maximum. I'm a big fan of him. I think Newcastle could be very different to last season. 2 signings today in Wilson and Fraser, I think make Newcastle actually worth thinking about in terms of attack. I'd love to see what they're priced at. I'm thinking they won't be cheaper than say maximum, so he's a nice way to have a Newcastle attacker. And then up front, Jiminez and Calvert-Lewin. Jiminez is just steady. He consistently scores week in, week out, racks up nearly 200 points a season. He's an easy switch for Ings, but I do prefer Jiminez. If I start with either of them, it's going to be Jiminez. That's why he's in this video. I think Ings was on my list, almost a 50-50 call, but personal preference, Jiminez. And then Calvert-Lewin is the second of the kind of risky punts that I talked about. The Everton attack is really interesting because, like Newcastle, signing today James Rodriguez, and the fact that they've signed Alan from Napoli, they have a holding midfielder, a recognised holding midfielder now. I think it's going to give them a better basis for attack. Whether Calvert-Lewin starts up front with Richarlson in a 2, I can't see it happening. I think they'll have the kind of 4-2-3-1 Is that going to be Richarlson or Calvert-Lewin up front? That's why it's a bit of a punt. If I wanted to raise funds like Doherty, it would be Calvert-Lewin.
How expensive is Calvert-Lewin?
He's only 7 million, but there's players like Mitrovic, Shea Adams at a lower price bracket that do interest me. I think having Jiminez 8.5, Calvert-Lewin 7. If I was to change it around, maybe I could get Werner by dropping Calvert-Lewin to a Mitrovic or a Shea Adams. But then I'm missing out on my Wolves attacker because Jiminez is very steady. I'm a really big fan of his.
You say you have $1 million in the bank. You could upgrade Calvert-Lewin to Richarlson. I've gone for Richarlson at my team.
Yeah, I want to leave the $1 million in the bank, or at least 0.5 in the bank for game week 1. Because we are missing the Manchester teams in game week 1, and alongside the Manchester teams, we lose out on Burnley and Aston Villa. I've got plans that I'm definitely going to have one of the Manchester teams, at least one player in game week 2. Probably focus on Man United. They've got the better fixture. They play Crystal Palace. Man City start off with a trip to or Wolves, which is, it's tricky. Wolves, I think, beat them twice last season. So yeah, Man U are the focus. There's a lot of good players in that Man U midfield. Rashford, Greenwood and Fernandes, priced between 7.5 to 10.5. I want to leave that $1 million there for bringing one of them in. Just to finish off my team on my bench, Romeo, I think it's important to have at least one or two players playing on your bench. I can't recall any occasions where I've gone down to third sub, so you'll see Wickham there. He's already marked unknown return date, which is a new status to me. But I think one or two players this year, especially with COVID, like we've already seen Mahrez and I think Laporte today announced that they have tested positive for COVID. That puts them in risk for game week 2, surely, which could open the door for maybe punt on the new guy Torres at Man City. He scored a beautiful goal last night or recently for Spain. And then Button's an interesting backup keeper. He's actually just moved to West Brom. He's only 4 million. And he's come out himself saying he expects Johnson to start because he got them promoted. I don't think he moved from one club to another, like Brighton to West Brom, just to stay number 2. Is he worse than Sam Johnson? I don't think so. He's one to keep an eye on, and at 4 million, he's not exactly taking up too much room on my bench. I'm happy to leave him there if he stays as a number 2.
Okay. Well, look, thanks for that. We'll have a quick look at mine now and compare. So, as you can see, it's quite a different team than you've selected. I suppose the similarities that we have are Mo Salah, Aubamayang, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think that they are nailed on for most teams in the league. If you don't have Alexander-Arnold in your team, you're not playing properly. 7.5 million, and he scored 210 points last year. That's more than most forwards or midfielders scored. It's a massive return, so you've got to have him in the team. Mo Salah, again, for the last 2 or 3 years, has been super consistent, and you touched on Aubamayang being moved from a forward to a midfielder, which is a total game changer because he's guaranteed to score and guaranteed to play every single week. And from midfield, he's going to take in more points than he's ever taken before. So I definitely agree with you with those 3 picks there. I've gone for Kasper Schmeichel in goals. The toss-up there was himself or Alisson, but as you can see, I've gone for Joe Gomez in defence over here. I've had a quick look at Leicester's fixtures. We'll have a quick look here. And as you can see, they are quite handy for the first 6 weeks there. They've got 3 2s. Obviously, they do have a trip there to Man City, but we might have a reserve keeper in for that week. I've gone for John Egan at centre-back based purely on his performances last season. I think they have a relatively decent start to the season as well. As you can see there, 2 from the first 3. And again, 3 from the first 5 2s there. So definitely himself and Basham were in the team, but I've sacrificed Basham for Gomez just for the first game. I've done a bit of research today into the newly promoted teams and discovered that Pereira last season for West Brom played 42 times. He scored 8 goals and achieved 16 assists in the Championship next year. So he's absolutely integral to everything that West Brom do. They're not necessarily the same West Brom that we'd be familiar with from seasons gone by in the Premier League. They're much flashier, less defensive focused West Brom. So although you might be tempted to pick the likes of Ayaji, who scored 5 goals as a centre-back last year, they only kept 14 clean sheets. So I'd say avoid West Brom defenders at all costs. I wouldn't back them to do it in the Premier League. But as you can see on my bench over here, I've gone for Dallas, who will actually feature quite a lot for me this year. He scored 5 goals, got 3 assists, and made 45 appearances for Leeds last season. Leeds kept 22 clean sheets, which is 48% of their games in the Championship were clean sheets. Himself and possibly a goalkeeper. I have Martinez in here from Arsenal on the off chance that he becomes the first choice keeper. But Leeds' 2 keepers, Castilla and Meslier, are both rated 4.5 as well. I'm just waiting to see who's the first choice there. Castilla was the first choice last year until he was banned for the last 8 games of the season, or picked up an 8-game ban towards the end. Meslier played the last 10, keeping 7 clean sheets, so he could well be Bielsa's preferred option this year. I've gone for Adama Traore as a steal in midfield for 6.5 million. We all know what he can do. I'm thinking that this might be the season that he pushes on again and becomes a little bit more consistent. He's featured in my midfield. The biggest decision I think I had to make was between Richarlson and Jiminez, and I didn't want to put too much in the bank, too much faith, in Wolves for the first couple of weeks. I think you can see their fixtures here. They start off, obviously, Sheffield United away and then City at home. They both come up as 4s. But then after that, I think probably game week 3, I'll be looking to swap Richarlison for Jiminez. I think Everton have a slightly nicer start to the season. Spurs away, I don't know how that's a 4.
Second season.
Well, that's true, I suppose. But then West Brom at home in the second game is probably a bit nicer than City away. So that's the only reason I've opted for him there. Mitrovic, obviously, is the main man at Fulham up top. He scored 26 goals last year, 41 games, got 3 assists as well. But we all know that he's a Premier League quality player. That was just taking a year off in the Championship. When was the last time he was in the league? 3 seasons ago? He was hit and miss.
Wrong, but dipped off quite quickly. I'm not sold on him as a striker.
I think he's going to be integral to everything that.
He's Fulham's guy. He is
everything that Fulham do.
About Pereira for West Brom, Mitrovic is that for Fulham. Like everything goes through him.
Well, that's it. Again, I do have probably 11 capable outfielders, including Dallas there and the defender. So there is flexibility in that formation as well. Obviously, with the trip to Anfield in the first game, he's not first off the bench, but most weeks he'll be starting, or at least first off the bench, as I can see it. And again, you talk about punts. I mentioned Martinez there, who's only 4.5 and could well find himself being Arsenal's first choice goalkeeper based on his performances towards the end of last season. I think that team is going to be pretty set for the first couple of weeks. You talk about the Manchester teams. Aubamayang is probably going to only stay in the team for the first 2 games. If you look at their run-in, those 2s, and that'll be a Kevin De Bruyne switch after the first 2 game weeks, or potentially a Bruno Fernandes if I want to free up a bit of cash somewhere else. Ideally, we'll avoid making a transfer after the first game week to allow 2 the week after that. It won't be too rash after the first week. I think everyone can get a little bit jumpy sometimes after the first game week. So I'll try keep the faith with that going into the second week, and then give myself 2 transfers to play with going into game week 3. Obviously with the Manchester teams back in action and back settled, I'll have a better idea as to the goalkeeping situation at some clubs. Yeah, I think Romeu is one of the most highly selected players in the league because of, what is he?
4.7.
No teams select. Well, I thought he'd be more than that because he does play almost every game for them. He is only 4.5, and Bernardo here. Players that missed out. I spoke about Jimenez, Connor Cody for Wolves as well. Obviously, they had that nice run of games from week 3, so that might be a switch for Joe Gomez. And I think that's what I have to say on my team for now. I think I've got a pretty decent balance, but we'll see how that goes. Obviously, with the Manchester teams coming back into action, United were obviously so defensively strong last year that I think they had the best defensive record in the league, or at least after Christmas they were miles ahead in terms of defensive record. So there might be a cheap United defender coming in there. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the future content to come in relation to the fantasy football. We will be starting a PFP Fantasy League. The link to that and the login and the code will be in the description of the YouTube video and on our socials as well. You will be able to join the league through September. It'll be shut midnight on the last day of September. You will not be able to get in October 1st. Sean Windsor has been adamant about this. There are no vultures coming in game week 4 or 5 because they've got off to a good start. But yeah, the details on our league will be in the bio. Guys, we will be doing this every week. If you're here watching the video today, it's because you want as much information on your fantasy team as possible. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel because you will get more information by doing it. It's not going to hurt you. You're going to get more information. We're going to get more subscribers. We're going to produce better content. You're going to receive quality content. It's a win-win situation for absolutely everybody. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We do videos on TikTok, but YouTube is the main place to be. So just be sure before you go that if you've enjoyed this at all, you click that subscribe button and let's keep the channel growing. Sean, thank you so much for your help today.
Right, Rafe. Looking forward to playing against you this season.
May the best man win.